Yes,
Thank
yes.
you. Thank you, Dr. Sampath, and congratulations on attending many courses in many countries. I'm sure that has either made you a very wise man or a very confused man. I think I leave you and your colleagues to judge that.
Okay.
Now, what I'm going to talk about is on change tack, really, because after all, today is UN Day, as you have reminded us at the beginning, but we have not really talked much about it so far. And reflect perhaps on the issues of war and peace from a more global and international perspective. So, and there I will try and be a little bit provocative, because having listened to our distinguished friends here and colleagues, I see a number of assumptions which are don't necessarily apply in the geopolitical sphere. So while I think what may apply in a family dispute, what may apply in a community dispute in a country, can it be translated just like that to an international dispute between nations? So if we look at international peacekeeping, for example, now, it is a $7 billion operation, $7 billion. There are about a dozen peacekeeping operations around the world, more than 100,000 soldiers. But largely, they do very little other than keep conflicts frozen for a period of time until the world gets impatient and can't foot the bill. And then these soldiers leave. And in between, peacekeeping doesn't necessarily result in a solution to the underlying problems, because the solutions are not amenable to the sorts of interventions that a club of countries can make if, for example, the members of that club are not minded to comply. Also, as I have been researching, the amount of abuse and exploitation, including sexual abuse and exploitation, that takes place when international peacekeepers operate in some countries, including rape and many other conditions, is actually quite staggering. So I think the modality of peacekeeping, at least as practiced in the UN, which might have done some useful things at a distant time, long time ago, 70 years ago, 60 years ago, 50 years ago, needs to be revisited for today's age. Today, for example, countries are very, very concerned about intervention from others. And that applies to India as well. On the matter of India's dispute with Pakistan over Kashmir, India doesn't want any arbitration by any international body to come in and to tell the two countries what to do about it. It's a bilateral matter between the two countries, according to Indian policy. Similarly, I think the position adopted by India in the UN Security Council, of which it is a member nowadays, is against intervention in other countries. And it's tragic to see that this non-intervention policy is resulting in what is going on, for example, in the Tigray region of Ethiopia, where a mass murder and genocide is taking place. And the UN Security Council is completely neutralized by this, because countries like members like India, China, Russia are disallowing the UN to intervene. So I think it can be a little bit hypocritical to be talking about peace and conflict resolution when actually national interests and the national and geopolitical interests provide no incentives for the resolution of such armed conflicts. And in these armed conflicts, millions are suffering. There's starvation going on in Tigray. There is a huge food shortages in South Sudan. There is now we're having additional problems on top of that. For example, climate change. When we start getting resource wars because of shortage of water or competition over land or environmental degradation, which is going to lead to millions of people being uprooted from their lands and finding safety elsewhere. Or indeed, in the case of some countries, like in the low-lying regions, say in the Pacific or the Caribbean, these countries might disappear. So what exactly is going to happen when the problems, geopolitical problems, environmental problems, and other international disputes, to which at one stage the UN might have been expected to provide a solution because the members of the UN believed in a certain rule of law to which everyone believed in or complied with. But today we live in the age of impunity, where the UN can pontificate in whatever way it likes. It can set norms if it wants to, which it does. But by and large, countries don't. Countries will only follow what is in their interest to do so. And this, by the way, applies to both rich and poor countries. The way the United States behaves, or the way China behaves, don't be surprised then that if the superpowers behave that way, or budding superpowers like India behave that way, then smaller countries also feel that why they should follow an international law and order. So I think it's a sober reflection on this anniversary of the United Nations. You know, the UN was formed in the crucible of war after the Second World War, the greatest of all wars. And its principal purpose, if you look at the UN Charter, is around peace. But what's happened over subsequent decades is that it has become a social welfare organization. It has become a development organization. And by confusing the peace agenda with all the other agendas, we have effectively neutralized the UN. Well, I agree that poverty is a form of violence also. I agree that gender inequality is a form of violence also. I agree that if you are hungry, if you are unhealthy, then that is a form of violence on the human condition. But by that logic and widening definition of conflict, what we've done is we have actually taken away the principal purpose for having an international organization to mediate between nations. And I believe that that many UN agencies, and I worked in many of them in my long career, they have made big business out of social development, but out of economic development and other forms of development, and also, by the way, from on peace business as well. Peacekeeping is the most expensive part of the UN budget, and possibly the least effective in a way. And so what is going on now is we are in a very bad state of affairs. And I think it is important that academics, and more importantly, people on the ground, more important than academics, more important than professors, people who are at the coal face of where these paradoxes and contradictions collide with reality, we try to find a better and different paradigm. I mean, going back to peacekeeping for a moment, one of the biggest scandals in UN peacekeeping, apart from the abuses that soldiers commit in their host countries, often the host countries are very poor, and and the soldiers who commit these abuses, they just come back to their own countries, where of course they're not prosecuted generally. There is impunity there. Apart from that, many countries who have been contributing their soldiers supposedly in the cause of peace, it is a way of subsidizing their own military. Because if these soldiers were in their own country, they would be making coups. They would be making problems within their own country. Much better to send them off on some foreign place under the UN umbrella, ostensibly to bring peace, earn money, because soldiers are paid, I think the fee is over $1,000 per soldier. that a country gives to the UN for peacekeeping duty. Of course, the soldiers are not getting $1,000. They're getting their normal few dollars salary. So countries are profiting and subsidizing their forces. Not every country, not everywhere. I'm just illustrating some of the abuses and excesses that are taking place. So my dear friends, I think the theory looks good, connecting social development and peace, connecting democracy and peace, connecting human rights and peace, and of course, justice and accountability and peace absolutely go together. But on this anniversary, and I spent 30, 40 years in the international sphere, not just in the UN, but also in government as well as in other organizations. We have got to a state of affairs where the conflict and peace business has become a self-serving business of itself, as opposed to having the humility and understanding to realize that our efforts very often are largely theoretical, and in many, many cases, they are irrelevant to at least the business of strategic peace. I mean, I'm not talking about mediation at the family level in a divorce case or in a property case or in those kinds of cases. Absolutely, and I think lawyers that are trying to solve problems without going to without actually going and making more money from the disputes between people, they are to be commended. But we don't. But in the international sphere, which is what we're here talking about, according to the title and remit you gave us, I think this is a big scam. So my dear friends in India and elsewhere, we have to start looking at that by looking at it in our own national policies and how those national policies inject into the international paradigm. So if a country behaves immorally, unethically, and promotes its own blind national self-interest while it is serving in international councils like the General Assembly or the Security Council or whatever, then how can it lecture anyone else? How can those countries actually be worthy of ever being on the Security Council? And that includes the current members of the Security Council. So I would say that the best way to reflect on UN Day is to actually have that self-reflection to see if you can think of a better, more honest way of doing conflict resolution and peace building than the somewhat self-serving methodologies we are utilizing nowadays. Thank you.